Hello, and welcome to the 2023 MSc in Counseling Research Conference. Thank you so much for showing an interest in this topic, where I will be discussing the findings of my research project, which looked into the relationship between 10 different types of motivations for why we play video games and its relationship to self-compassion. My name is Umaimah, and I am a second-year trainee counselor. The reason I picked this topic is because video games is how I tend to decompress when I'm stressed, but sometimes I don't necessarily feel better after playing video games, especially if I use video games as a form of avoidance. So I was really interested and wanted to look into the relationship between the motivations and self-compassion. Also, before I start off, I'd like to thank my research group partner, Rista Katranjev, for being an incredibly calm and positive influence and for all of his support. I am incredibly grateful. This is the overview of my presentation, where I will start with a literature review and background, then go into my research question and hypothesis, explain the methods, and then discuss the results, practical implications, and provide a take-home message. Video games is something a lot of us enjoy, with 3 billion players worldwide as of 2022. Research conducted on video games has mixed results, where some research states that engaging in video games correlates with lower stress and anxiety scores and enhances well-being and self-compassion. However, other research suggests that higher video game playtime is negatively affecting general health measures such as lower life satisfaction and is correlated with symptoms of depression and anxiety. Evren 2020 states that although many studies highlight the negative aspects of video gaming, video games could fulfill certain human needs arising from modern society in innovative ways. Therefore, if gaming fulfills people's fundamental needs, it cannot be evaluated as good or bad. Rather, it should be evaluated from a motivational perspective, and the reasons and incentives for gamers to play should be investigated. Kirali et al. In 2022 developed a new instrument to measure a comprehensive motivational profile of a gamer independent of the genre of the video game. The reasons for gameplay could include any of these 26 motivations that you can see on the screen, and out of these 26, I have decided to select 10 motivations that are of interest to look into its relationship with self-compassion. Research shows that video games which satisfies basic needs such as autonomy would lead to higher well-being, and if these were ignored, it would lead to lower psychological functioning. Great emotional well-being has been positively associated with lower stress and higher self-compassion. Self-compassion can be described as acknowledging that all people, including oneself, are worth of compassion. It is about accepting suffering and failure as a part of the human condition. Neff 2003 states that self-compassion is being open and offering yourself patience and kindness. So how are these variables connected to one another? This study aims to investigate these 10 motivations behind playing video games and its association to self-compassion. In the realm of counseling, it would be a common occurrence for clients to engage in video games. It's imperative for counselors to have a comprehensive understanding of the specific motivations behind why clients engage in video games, especially if it's deemed problematic. Investigating these variables simultaneously supports the future development of interventions that target these specific motivations, interventions with self-compassion. It furthers the field of healthy gaming and sheds light into motivations behind problematic gaming. Two hypotheses were drawn from the literature review. Hypothesis number 1 states that the motivations of amotivation, boredom, coping, escape, and fantasy will be negative predictors of self-compassion, while hypothesis number 2 states that the motivations of cooperation, competence, identity, recreation, and social will be positive predictors of self-compassion. Data was collected between December 2022 and January 2023, where participants were recruited through opportunity sampling via social media platforms such as Facebook, Instagram, and Reddit. We also utilized SONA, the Bangor University Psychology Student Participation Panel, where undergraduate students were awarded 2 course credits for their participation. After the removal of test data, the sample size was 1,115 participants. Individuals who were interested were directed to the research study hosted on Qualtrics, which was available in English and Welsh language. They were first presented with an information sheet discussing the study's variables. Next, participants were presented with a consent form, which the participants were required to agree to if they wished to take part in the study. After this, participants were presented with some demographic questions, and then some questions asking them about their video game habits, and then the measures of the gaming motivation inventory, self-compassion scale, and the meaning in life questionnaire was presented, and it was finally followed by a debrief form. As for the ethics of the study, participants were provided with an information sheet and debrief sheet which explained the aims and variables of the study and highlighted data protection guidelines that it adheres to. The potential risks identified were that participants may report significantly high video game playtime, and these risks were managed by providing signposting information to resources that specifically address video game addiction and mental health, which included reaching out for counseling and self-help resources with psychoeducation on addiction. Participants were also informed of their rights to withdraw at any point during the study. Contact information of the research team and supervisor were provided if there were any concerns. Confidentiality was assured to participants, where participant data would be stored securely on a password-protected University OneDrive with no identifying information. Finally, this study has been approved by the Bangor University School of Human and Behavioral Sciences Research Ethics and Governance Committee, and the study also adheres to the BPS and the BACP guidelines for ethical research and practice. The 3 questionnaires presented to participants were the Gaming Motivation Inventory, the Self-Compassion Scale, and the Meaning in Life questionnaire, which was used in a sub-study by my research group partner. So to dive into the Gaming Motivation Inventory, this is a comprehensive tool containing 88 items in the form of 26 motivation types. Each motivation component is made up of 3 to 5 items, with higher scores in these items relating to a higher correlation with that particular motivator, providing the opportunity to create a substantial gaming profile for a gamer with 26 motivations for why they play. We have narrowed it down to 10 motivation types that we are interested in, and I have put up 2 such motivations, which is escape and social, and the items belonging to these 2 motivators for your reference. Participants were then presented with the Self-Compassion Scale short form, which contains 12 items divided into 6 subscales. These subscales are self-kindness, self-judgment, common humanity, isolation, mindfulness, and over-identification. 3 of these subscales are reverse scored, and once reverse scored and added up, you can get a mean self-compassion score for the participants. It is rated on a 5-point Likert scale ranging from 1 to 5, and I have provided a few of the items for reference from the self-compassion scale. Looking at the descriptive statistics, the average age of participants in the study was 26.89 years, with most participants identifying as male. Looking at the gaming platform usage, a combination of PC laptop was the most selected option, followed by a combination of PC laptop and gaming console, and a combination of PC, laptop, and smartphone. The average time per week spent playing video games for this sample is 36.7 hours, showing a highly engaged sample of gamers, which is exactly what we were looking for in our study. A multiple regression analysis was conducted to examine the predictors of self-compassion. The 10 predictors of motivations behind playing video games were simultaneously entered into the model, which were amotivation, boredom, competence, coping, escape, fantasy, identity, recreation, social, and cooperation. The overall model was statistically significant and had an R-square value of 0.236, which means that this model explained 23.6% of the variance in self-compassion. The table on the slide here shows the regression coefficients of motivations behind playing video games on self-compassion, where we can evaluate each of the 10 motivator independent variables and how they contributed to the prediction of the dependent variable, which is self-compassion. When we look at the beta values, we can see that the largest beta coefficient is minus 0.40 from the motivation of escape. This is the variable that makes the strongest unique contribution to explaining the dependent variable of self-compassion, when the variance explained by all the other variables in the model is controlled for. The beta values for amotivation and boredom is lower, minus 0.12 and minus 0.11, indicating that these made less of a contribution. If you look at the column labeled P, this is where it shows if a variable is making a statistically significant unique contribution to the equation. If the value is less than 0.05, then we can deduce that variable is making a significant unique contribution to the prediction of the dependent variable. And in here, highlighted in blue, we can see that the variables of amotivation, boredom, and escape are significant. So what do these numbers mean? The results show us that the variables of escape, amotivation, and boredom are significant negative predictors of self-compassion, which basically means that if these were your reasons for playing video games, then you may experience lower levels of self-compassion. This is a correlational relationship, and therefore causation cannot be supported. These results do support the findings of the literature review, which states that people who are self-compassionate tend to use adaptive coping strategies and are less likely to use maladaptive escape avoidance coping strategies. This study provides insight in this avenue where people who are self-compassionate are less likely to play video games as a means of escape. Furthermore, the motivations of amotivation and boredom as general concepts, which are associated with problematic gaming, is in line with previous literature and supports the idea if one engages in video games due to the motivations of not having a good enough reason, feels like I'm wasting my time, to pass time while I'm bored and there is nothing left to do, which were the statements present in the Gaming Motivation Inventory by Kirali et al. 2022, then they are more likely to have lower levels of self-compassion. There were no predictive relationships found between self-compassion and the motivations of coping, fantasy, identity, competence, recreation, social, and cooperation. This could be because the concept of the fantasy motivator is too complex to have a direct correlation with self-compassion. Playing for the purpose of fantasy could be because the player enjoys being a Jedi Knight in Star Wars, which is recreational, and answers the statement, because I can do things that I am unable to do or I am not allowed to do in real life, in the Gaming Motivation Inventory. Or it could be a means of avoidance and escaping real-life stressors, which is maladaptive, but this also answers another statement, which is, I want to be in another world, which are both grouped under the fantasy motivator in the Gaming Motivation Inventory. The motivator of coping, strongly correlated with the escape motivator, also could be too complex to look for a linear relationship. Looking deeper into the statements in the gaming motivation inventory, one of the statements grouped under coping was, "Because it helps me get my anger out." This could be interpreted as emotional approach coping, where the individual is actively trying to manage the anger by expressing it, which is cathartic, or as an individual using games to avoid dealing with the origin of the anger, which is a distraction technique. Furthermore, another statement under the coping motivator, which is, "Because it helps me get rid of stress." This could be interpreted by participants as distracting oneself from the stressor, which is avoidance coping and is maladaptive, or it could even be interpreted as using video games as a relaxation technique and is self-care. As such, due to the complex nature of these statements, a linear relationship with self-compassion may not be possible. Furthermore, the relationship between the variables of identity, recreation, and self-compassion may have mediator variables such as well-being or positive effect between them, instead of a linear correlation relationship with self-compassion, which may explain why there was no correlational relationship. As for the variables of competence, cooperation, and social, when looking at self-compassion, it could look vastly different for an extrovert when compared to an introvert, where someone who is an extrovert may truly enjoy the social component and social gatherings, as this may support them with their self-compassion, while an introvert may not necessarily find this same support through socialization, which may explain why there was no linear relationship. Additionally, a gamer's self-compassion levels may not be directly linked to how much one enjoys playing a cooperative team player game, as opposed to playing a single-player game, which may be why there was no correlation or predictive power found between the motivator of cooperation and self-compassion. When looking at the limitations of the study, the majority of the answers were from Reddit and were also male, which makes it quite hard to generalize to all people who play video games. Furthermore, as it is a correlational study, causation cannot be supported, and perhaps a longitudinal study would be interesting to look at. Furthermore, as there were many complex relationships that were found after analysis, perhaps a future direction would be to look at a lower number of motivations with more mediator variables in between to get a clear idea of how it's related to one another. Regarding practical implications in a therapeutic context, the aim would be to identify what the strongest motivators are for clients to engage in video games, and once identified, to collaboratively find different alternative methods to cope with the stresses. For example, if a client engages in video games because they can't bear the stress of their academic work and use it as a form of escapism, then once this is identified, it can be worked on during counseling sessions. This can be achieved by the client talking about their academic stress without avoiding it, making practical collaborative schedules to engage with gaming time and work time, and identifying a support network of peers, mentors, and university support services, as well as working on increasing their levels of self-compassion. The take-home message would be that taking a therapeutic approach where the client's stresses are validated, where a safe space is provided with no negative stigma when a client talks about high levels of gaming, and where the therapy is solution-focused and provides psychoeducation on these motivators, and if you work on finding out why the client plays video games, and if you subsequently focus on self-compassion levels, then this would be an ideal scenario for a client's goals of moving towards healthier gaming habits. If you would like a condensed version of this information, a handout of my presentation is available with references if you click on the link below. If you have any questions, please comment them and I'll get back to you. Thank you once again for coming to my presentation, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the research conference done by my brilliant peers.